West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
But we begin tonight with a wild day in court in Fulton County, Georgia, as we learn the source of the leaked confidential interviews between DA Fani Willis's office and some key figures in her January 6th RICO case. Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee said he'd issue a protective order in the case, barring disclosure of certain information from the discovery process, one that would allow some evidence from the pretrial discovery process to be labeled sensitive and withheld from public scrutiny. The videos obtained by ABC News and the Washington Post showed interviews with witnesses Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, Scott Hall, and with Kenneth Chesborough, whose video was not released publicly. All have taken plea deals to flip on Donald Trump, and the release prompted today's emergency hearing. At that hearing, there was a surprise confession from the source, Jonathan Miller, the attorney for one of Donald Trump's 18 other co-defendants. Former Coffee County election supervisor, Misty Hampton.
In being transparent with the court and to make sure that nobody else gets blamed for what happened, and so that I can go to sleep well tonight, Judge, I did release those videos to one outlet, and in all candor to the court, I need the court to know that.
Attorney Mitchell's explanation was that hiding the videos would, in his words, mislead the public about what went into the 4 guilty pleas, adding that he believed it would help his client, saying that 2 of the defendants were directly related to my client. Mitchell did not say who those 2 clients might be, but his client, Misty Hampton, is charged along with Powell and Hall in a scheme to access voting machines in Coffee County. Meanwhile, Fani Willis also sought to revoke the bond of another of Trump's co-defendants, Harrison Floyd, the former head of Black Voices for Trump, citing a pattern of intimidation toward co-defendants and witnesses, noting that Floyd engaged in numerous intentional and flagrant violations of his bond agreement. Those violations include recent tweets tagging individuals like Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and former Fulton County elections worker Ruby Freeman. Joining me now is Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney and law professor at the University of Michigan, and Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you, ladies. Lisa, I do want to start with you because it strikes me that in this last case, the case of this attempt to revoke the bond of this defendant who was involved in the attempt to intimidate Ruby Freeman in the first place, Harrison Floyd. Interesting that he is now looking at having his bond revoked and could wind up in jail. That is not something that Donald Trump has faced, even though he, too, has intimidated witnesses. Did that come up? Did his lawyers bring that up in this case? Because it's interesting that he's doing what Donald Trump is doing, but not facing the same, freedom to move.
So, Joy, this motion was filed after today's hearing, and so I'm not aware that anybody addressed what conduct Donald Trump has engaged in that might, for example, violate his own conditions of release vis-a-vis the other Fulton County defendants and witnesses. That having been said, the Fulton County DA lays out a number of acts over the last 2 weeks, in particular, between November 1st and November 14th, where Harrison Floyd, as you noted, has gone after a number of his co-defendants or witnesses, in particular, really attacking Jenna Ellis. And I'm looking at one of the tweets right now, 2 days ago, saying that she was lying on Dan Scavino. And I guess they don't teach ethics at Harvard Law anymore. As an aside, Jenna Ellis did not go to Harvard Law School. But the larger point is that Harrison Floyd has engaged in a 2-week-long campaign to intimidate and fight back against people involved in this case, ranging from Brad Raffensperger and Gabe Sterling, as you noted, to Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell. And then finally, the motion ends with a litany of his tweets aimed squarely at Ruby Freeman, who is the person that he victimized in the first place, leading to the charges against him, and who he continues to victimize and was probably the most offensive conduct that he engaged in, according to DA Fani Willis's team. So I look forward to seeing how this motion is litigated, but this is just the opening salvo that we have here right now, Joy.
Barb, can you comment on this? Because, I mean, the thing is that Donald Trump, the problem with his behavior is that it is infectious. That other people who are MAGA think that they can do what he can do, but he was a former president of the United States. He's not a black guy who was the head of Black Voices for Trump. This guy's already been jailed for his previous conduct that was violent-ish, and he was the one who was in jail, the only one who was actually jailed prior to his plea. He's now attacking the same person he's accused of intimidating, bullying her again, continuing to victimize her. It's a wonder he hasn't already been put back in jail. However, there is a discrepancy between the kind of bullying that he can do. He probably doesn't have 25 million or however many followers that Donald Trump used to have on Twitter, or however many he has on Truth Social. Trump can actually direct a mob at people. This guy can't. But can you just address the discrepancy in the sanctions that both of them face? I mean, it's obvious he's not the former president, so he doesn't have Secret Service, but come on.
Yes. So, you know, in this case, and the Georgia RICO case, there is not currently any sort of gag order like the one that we've seen in the federal election interference case or the one in New York. So that's not what the concern is here. One of his bond conditions is that he not communicate about the case with any of his co-defendants or witnesses. And so I think this conduct directed directly toward Ruby Freeman is particularly problematic with that bond condition. As we just heard from Lisa, she was the direct victim. He tried to intimidate her and coerce her into confessing falsely that she had violated and committed fraud in the election, when, of course, that wasn't true at all. And so that sort of intimidation, it goes to the very heart of this case. So I don't imagine that at the very first instance, the judge's first instinct will be to cancel his bond and put him in jail. But I think it's important that the judge send a message that he takes these conditions very seriously. And so I imagine we will see him in court with at least a warning, and a second violation may land him in jail. And of course, as you point out, Donald Trump says all kinds of things about people, including about people who might be witnesses or might be co-defendants. And so it seems that it's Fani Willis who's giving him a slightly longer leash. And I imagine part of that is because as a candidate for president in the future, judges are likely to be inclined to give him a little more leeway so that he can respond in the public arena to these charges against him. But I think you raise a good point about treating like people alike. And I think Fani Willis has to be careful not to be seen as holding herself to double standards.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, his team moving for a mistrial. Let me read some of what his proffer is trying to get a mistrial. It's so many cases, it's hard to keep them straight at this point. Lisa, I'm going to leave it to you to explain more. Here's what he wrote in this case. The evidence of apparent and actual bias. I think this is in his New York case. This is his New York case, which he's already lost. It's tangible and overwhelming. Such evidence, coupled with an unprecedented departure from standard judicial procedure, has tainted these proceedings, and a mistrial is warranted. Let me add another thing. He's also gone after the law clerk, saying that this is the other piece of his proffer. It's saying the law clerk has no constitutional authority to act as a co-judge And the impropriety of her participation is further magnified by the fact that she has violated a separate canon of ethics by making partisan political contributions in excess of strict limits, including to organizations actively supporting Attorney General James and opposing Donald Trump. Can you talk about that just a little bit, Lisa, this attempt to try to throw out a case that is already kind of decided?
Yeah, it's interesting, Joyce, because, to your point, when you say it's already kind of decided, this is something that I am trying to make clear to our viewers whenever I have an opportunity to comment on this case. The judge did decide that there has been a pervasive and years-long fraud engaged in by the Trump organization and the 5 individual defendants with respect to how Donald Trump valued his assets. But there are 6 remaining claims here. That's why we're still having a trial that I have been attending fairly regularly. And each of those claims require proof of intent by the defendants. And that is why they are as contested as they are, and they will take as long to try as they will. Those claims are also important to the Attorney General because the magnitude of the relief that she is fighting for will largely turn on how they are able to show intent by Donald Trump, his adult sons, Alan Weisselberg, the former CFO, Jeff McConney, who was the former controller, and then the organization as a whole. So the case is very much still alive. Now, to your question about the principal law clerk and the judge, the allegation that Donald Trump's lawyers are making is that this judge is functioning effectively as a co-judge and that nobody elected her, that she exchanges notes and constant whispers with Judge Arthur Engoron that lead them to believe that she is exercising a level of authority that is inappropriate. And on top of that, because of her partisan political contributions and activities, that she is already a person who's demonstrated a partisan prejudgment of Donald Trump before she ever walked in the room. I think that to the extent that they are able to show that her campaign contributions are problematic and are a violation of judicial ethics here in New York, that will not be a basis for a mistrial or overturning any later decision by Judge Engoron. It will likely be, if proven, a basis for discipline. And as you know, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has a pending complaint with the New York Commission on Judicial Ethics. But there isn't a lot of proof that the conversations between the judge and his law clerk are, in fact, emblematic of bias. As Barb knows well, just because you lose repeatedly in front of a judge doesn't mean that judge is biased. It might mean that you actually committed the conduct of which you've been accused and might be held liable in the future.
It is Thursday, the 16th of November of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Just a little, okay? All right, just a little to tickle your fancy. Speaking of tickling our fancy, do you get the feeling that these pop-up ceasefire protests have the smell of AstroTurf? Boy, I sure do. I mean, they got the signage, the t-shirts, all the other murk, too. They got tables of murk. I'm just saying. I see Russian psyops when I see it. You know, it's like anything. Like, is it pornography? I know it when I see it. Yeah. Is it art? I know it when I see it. So I'm just telling you, it looks like Russian psyops. That's right. Because they have a tendency across the world to have these massive protests in front of democratic institutions. Okay? I'm just saying. No one's going to a MAGA center complaining about, anybody there calling for a ceasefire. Why aren't you doing that? In spite of the facts, not to mention a total disregard of history, not only generally in the world, but that region in particular. Gosh, I used to think that, getting old, you naturally become an historian because you live through all that. But how many of us get to really remember the nuances? Boy, that's what's tough. That's why we have to codify it. That's why we have history and historians. And no wonder they got rid of it. To me, it's a bit alarming. Well, not alarming, because we and I mentioned this way back in the day that exactly what is happening would happen. But a whole generation or generations of kids who never had a civics class. And then there's a generation or so of kids who have gone to college and they don't even have any humanities offered. Used to be a requirement, at least a couple. No matter what your field. And so apparently they're not able to tell when there's a PSYOPs operation going on TikTok and insisting that Osama bin Laden had a point. Yeah, he had a point. He wanted to kill Jews and everybody who might be helping him. His great manifesto, Letter to America. We, the taxpayer, we, the voters, were culpable, so therefore we needed to die. And these kids are out there going on TikTok saying, he had a point. Like I said, I know art when I see it. I know porn when I see it. I know erotica when I see it. It's really simple. Everything's gauzy. Kind of blurry a little bit in erotica. Okay? Porn is just, garish. But I'm just saying, I know it when I see it. And when Russian PSYOPs is smacking me in the face, waterboarding me, and then renditioning my ass into some sort of other realm where I'm tortured even further, I know it when I see it. Okay. And I'll tell you what's even more frightening, and it's not only Russian PSYOPs, but apparently our own homegrown MAGA billionaires who have a tendency to go towards the little goose-stepping aspect. Oh, yeah, let's have icons of history in my garden. What is Hitler and Goebbels doing there? Well, they were icons of their time, weren't they? Apparently. They are behind the funding of this as well. And why? Well, it could be just as crass as, we'll do anything. We'll throw anything up against the wall, whatever sticks, as long as we get to hold on to power. Because apparently, when you give it up to the voters, they don't want anything that we're going to be wanting. And they're going to enshrine it in the Constitution, and we can't have that. So let's get rid of the Constitution, too. I'm looking at you, Ohio. Little test tube baby. Yeah. Voters said we are going to enshrine the right to an abortion, a woman's bodily autonomy, in the Constitution, and the Ohio Republicans say, look, we didn't gerrymander this state to put us into power to give it up now, in spite of court decrees. Law and order my ass. I told everybody back then, and we all did. When you hear Law and Order, their goose-stepping parade isn't too far behind, because they're going to make up the law, and they're going to make sure you follow their orders. Law and Order. All right. Community policing. The beat cop. Well, back in the day, the beat cop might beat you. Lightly. Just lightly. Okay, well, we going all over the map on that rant, weren't we? It just bothers me. Because I think about all the things that Joe is doing, and they're calling him Genocidal Joe. Why won't he do anything? Because he is. Look at what has been accomplished. Now, are we just supposed to go in and impose our military might to keep all parties at bay? Give me a break. If we had done that, yeah, I think there would be protests in the street by the same actors. Genocide Joe. You know, the mullahs in Iran came out and said, we're not backing Hamas, so, Hamas better know we're standing back. Right around the time that there was some sort of reportage about another payment of money from that fund that was held in escrow from the Iranians for decades. And I think old Dark Brandon, our friend Dark Brandon, had a little tete-a-tete with those mullahs. Joe is trying to keep this from blowing up into Armageddon, which is what apparently a bunch of people want because they're crazy-ass lunatics. Holy hell, they want most of the world to be looking like Jonestown? Bloating in the jungle sun? Is that what they want us to be? My God. Osama bin Laden had a point in my ass. Okay, I'm just saying. All right, well, we could say a lot more, but we might have to. Yes, we should. I just looked at the rant time, and we're ranting. And why don't we give you a rundown on the curated part of the show? Because we need a little bit of order here. We need something to draw us away from the chaos and give us a little bit of stability. Why don't we? All right. At the top, yeah. Hey, just because Trump loses repeatedly doesn't mean all those judges, not a judge, but it doesn't mean that all those judges are biased. Not one. He might be guilty of the crimes that he's been charged with and been judged guilty of. My God. On the rest of the menu, a Montgomery County, Maryland middle school teacher is put on leave after publicly claiming the October 7 massacre was a hoax, among some other assertions. Very interesting. 24 people were arrested in Grants Pass, Oregon. That's just right next door. As part of a major illicit drug trafficking investigation. And guess what? It wasn't the Mexican drug cartels. Nope. They're being a little bit tight-lipped on the perps. But apparently some of these arrests have been going on, and they just got the bulk of them. And yeah, they're a bunch of, white guys. Prison gang Nazis, if you ask me, but that's just me. And the Federal Communications Commission has enacted new rules intended to eliminate discrimination in access to internet services. Yeah, apparently there's rampant racism involved in that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a German publisher will stop selling books about Vladimir Putin by an award-winning reporter who accepted money from Putin-aligned Russian oligarchs. I keep telling you, you know Russian psyops when you see it. Okay, I'm just saying. And calling them envoys of friendship between the Chinese and American peoples, Chinese President Xi Jinping promised that China will be sending new pandas to the United States. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank her for doing so. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And I know it's tough this time of year, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, thus becoming a Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills. And they keep going up, and this time of year, there's, big payments that happen. They all happen around the same time for the next few months. So any of your help would be absolutely appreciated, and we do thank those of you who have been so generous over these many years in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, even Facebook, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Our snoozing sous chef is really hard at work. Can you tell? He's just working away. We'll let him do that. If you would follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and also on Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook. I'll tell you why. Because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and therefore you can find those show notes and links very rapidly if you follow my social media feed, because the links are just there. They're right there. And that way you can read the actual articles that have inspired us so grandly each day at this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really, wherever podcasts can be found, you're just not going to find them on Stitcher. Nope, not anymore. Not anymore. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Nicole Asbury from the Washington Post. A Montgomery County teacher, that's in Maryland, by the way, may be on leave, not is, after screenshots of a Facebook post purported, I love this, to show her falsely claiming that the October 7 Hamas Music Festival massacre that killed 260 was a hoax. And that's what her school said. She also posted that, quote, Palestinians are being killed and their organs are being sold. How many times have we heard this just before every pogrom in the history of pogroms? I kid you not. Organ harvesting, drinking baby blood. The Jews. And that was circulated widely in Montgomery County over the weekend, and there is no evidence of organ harvesting, by the way. The reporter has to say. Okay? The middle school teacher wrote, debunked, no music festival attack. Babies were not burned. Women were not violated. Hospitals were attacked on purpose. That was Sabrina Kahn-Williams, who teaches world studies in addition to diversity, equity, and inclusion at Tilden Middle School. And that was according to the screenshots. She did not immediately reply to request a comment for this article because whoever expects that what they say might end up on the world stage? Well, Sabrina, here you are. The Rockville, Maryland Middle School's principal, Sapna Hopkins, informed parents on Monday that she was aware of social media posts made by a staff member at the school. She didn't name the staff member or details what the post said because everybody had already seen them. When you live in a town like this, here in Rogue River, Everybody knows. She wrote to families that she reported the incident to a school system department responsible for handling investigations of allegedly inappropriate employee actions. It's not alleged. It is. Anyway, and adding that an employee may be on leave during the investigation. Maybe. Okay. And then she wrote that a strict process governs our response to this matter, and any actions resulting from an investigation will be considered a personnel matter, which means she can't say anything about it because, citing employee privacy laws. Let's see. Parents in the middle school community were outraged at the Facebook post, which they say espoused the same rhetoric used by Holocaust deniers and anti-Semites. Several students at the school and their families are Jewish and have direct ties to Israel. 2 parents that were interviewed by the Post said. Some of those families know people who were killed during the October 7th attack or are being held hostage by Hamas. It feels especially jarring to have someone who teaches diversity and inclusion be also the same person who is doing real hatred, said Tamar Lecter, a parent of a 7th grader at the school. It begs the question of what is the training and what are we demanding of teachers who come into that space, said Lecter, who is Jewish and a dual Israeli and U.S. citizen. The middle school community had already encountered 2 anti-Semitic incidents in the past month. Drawings of swastikas were found on the campus twice in October. The Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. An investigation into what authorities described as a major drug trafficking group based in southern Oregon resulted in 24 arrests and seizures of guns, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and other drugs, law enforcement agencies said yesterday, Wednesday. The Drug Enforcement Administration, Oregon State Police, and the Grants Pass Police Department were among the agencies involved in the probe, which lasted more than a year. The agencies announced their investigation at a joint press conference in Grants Pass yesterday, Wednesday. As part of the investigation, 24 people were arrested in Oregon on Tuesday. Officers seized 37 guns, 4.5 pounds of meth, 1.5 pounds of fentanyl pills, and 0.11 pounds of fentanyl, Oregon State Police said. I guess that would be the powder. The amount of fentanyl had the potential to yield more than 144,000 lethal doses, said David Reams, special agent in charge of the DEA Seattle Division. Just 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be deadly. Officers also seized less than a pound of cocaine and 250 pounds of pot, the state police said. Before Tuesday, officers had already seized more than 9 pounds of fentanyl and 40 pounds of meth over the course of the investigation. And the DEA agent Reams said the investigation is ongoing. brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Federal Communications Commission has enacted new rules intended to eliminate discrimination in access to Internet services, a move which regulators are calling the first major U.S. digital civil rights policy. The rules package, which the Commission ratified yesterday, Wednesday, would empower the agency to review and investigate instances of discrimination by broadband providers to different communities based on income, race, ethnicity, or other protected classes. The order also provides a framework for the FCC to crack down on a range of digital inequities, including the disparities in the investment of services for different neighborhoods, as well as the digital divide, a term experts use to describe the complete lack of Internet access many communities experience due to regional or socioeconomic inequality. FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel said that Congress required the agency to adopt the rules and that address digital discrimination through bipartisan infrastructure legislation passed at the start of the Biden administration. Oh, the Inflation Reduction Act. Very interesting. Poorer, less white neighborhoods were found to have received lower investment in broadband infrastructure and offered worse deals for Internet service than comparatively whiter and higher income areas. That inequity in access was especially pronounced during the pandemic, the chairwoman said. There is no clear standard for tracking inequities in the provision of digital services through though communities impacted by other discriminatory practices such as redlining and rural disinvestment report worse rates of service or outright lack of access. I can attest to that. When I moved from the utopia, the paradise, the oasis of the Bay Area, and moved to the desolate climes of here in Southern Oregon, it was like being in a third world country. Electricity goes out on a regular basis. Internet just drops off if you can get it. Interesting. Now, the FCC hopes its new rules will streamline the process for reporting such issues to establish unofficial record of discrimination going forward. The telecommunications industry has opposed the framework, arguing that the policy would hamper investment in communities by requiring regulations that the industry says are unnecessary. In a statement after Wednesday's vote, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the industry's main trade association, called the new rules potentially unlawful. The group also said the FCC was seeking expansive new authority over virtually every aspect of the broadband marketplace. Meanwhile, Free Press Action, a digital advocacy group, applauded the new rules and called on the FCC to go further by reclassifying some aspects of broadband to bring about quick action and to bring back the important oversight powers the agency needs to do its job. And the FCC is also poised to re-implement landmark net neutrality rules that were rescinded under the Trump administration. President Joe Biden has said the investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law are meant to connect every U.S. household to quality Internet service by 2030, regardless of income or identity. Well, that brings us to our break. And why don't we? When we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can you own a machine gun? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The first answer? No! Because the 1934 National Firearms Act prohibits the sale and ownership of machine guns. The second answer? We'll see. We'll see involves bump stocks. Remember October 2017 in Las Vegas when a man killed 58 people and wounded 500 more in a matter of minutes? By himself, thanks to a bump stock, an attachment that allows semi-automatic rifles to fire in sustained rapid bursts like a machine gun. After that massacre, the Trump administration issued a regulation banning bump stocks, and lawsuits ensued, with most of the legal attacks on the ban failing. But recently, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the ban was illegal, and the Supreme Court has agreed to decide the issue. Opponents of the regulation claim that the executive branch has no authority to unilaterally ban bump stocks. The Biden administration counters that the regulation is consistent with the 1934 law. Opponents note that 42 states have no assault weapons ban, and 520,000 bump stocks were purchased during the 9 years they were for sale. Of note, this case does not involve the Second Amendment. The court is not being asked in this case to rule that you have a constitutional right to own a machine gun, but rather that bump stocks should remain legal unless and until Congress acts. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Closed primaries keep independents, the fastest growing bloc of voters, from voting in a Republican or Democratic primary. To include unaffiliated voters and to offer all voters more choice, states like Nevada and Arizona are considering fully open primaries and top 5 races. Open primaries generally mean that any unaffiliated voter may choose to vote in a Republican or Democratic primary, but there are variations. Maine switches in 2024 to a semi-open primary, allowing independents to vote without temporarily having to switch their affiliation. A 2020 ballot measure in Alaska switched the state to a single ballot or blanket primary for its congressional election, where all candidates are on a single ballot, the top 4 candidates move forward, and ranked choice voting is used to select a winner. In 2024, Nevada votes on a constitutional amendment implementing a similar top 5 system, and signature collection just started for 2 similar ballot measures in Arizona. Open primaries allow more choice for voters and can encourage candidates to be more moderate. In a state like Alaska, where 58% of voters are independent, Congresswoman Mary Portola ran with a positive campaign appealing to all voters and ultimately prevailed over former Governor Sarah Palin. Palin ran a largely negative campaign focused on her party opponents. We have more on how open primaries work at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1982. That Tuesday, the National Football League players ended their 57-day strike. The league scrambled to get the new season going, scheduling games for that very next Sunday. The shortened 9-game season included 2 games played before the walkout, and the rest after the strike ended. The biggest issue that led to the strike was compensation and benefits. The NFL had seen a surge in television revenue with a new 5-year contract worth $2.1 billion. The players asked for 55% of the league's growing profits. The Players Association also wanted a minimum pay scale based on years of service and improvements in healthcare and retirement benefits. The owners flatly refused. On September 20th, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants in a Monday night football game. The next day, the New York Daily News reported, quote, "For the first time in its 63-year history, labor troubles will throw the NFL for a loss." By a unanimous vote of its executive committee, the league's Players Association yesterday voted to call a strike. The article continued by writing, quote, "The players stressed that they had been forced to call the strike in frustration over what they termed management's twin failures to take them seriously and to bargain in good faith." Sports Illustrated summed up fan sentiments about the strike with a cover headline reading, split over the image of a deflated football. Finally, the two sides came to an agreement. The players won raises, bonuses based on years in the league, and severance packages for retiring players. But the gains were far below the union's goals. Bitterness lingered, and 5 years later, the players would be on strike once again. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit under foggy conditions, expecting highs in the low 60s, which is a bit warmer than yesterday. Partly cloudy skies later on, winds light and variable. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the low 40s, which means it could be in the upper 30s here at the mothership. Winds will be light and variable. Generally sunny tomorrow despite a few afternoon clouds. Highs once again in the low 60s. Winds light and variable. And we do have a forecast for rain coming in on Saturday and Sunday. We'll see if that actually develops. Pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 29 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising slightly at 30.03 inches. Visibility is down to 1.5 miles. And relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 46 degrees with rain. Paris is 50 degrees with rain and a wind advisory. Rome is 63 and partly cloudy, also with a wind advisory. Bagram is 48 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 37 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 62 degrees and fair, also with a wind advisory. Tokyo is 56 degrees with rain and a gale advisory. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 56 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 57 and fair. And New York, New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A German publishing house said yesterday, Wednesday, it would stop selling books about Russian President Vladimir Putin by an award-winning journalist following media reports that he received at least $650,000 U.S. in offshore payments linked to Russian oligarchs. Publisher Hoffmann und Kamp said in a statement it would no longer sell two nonfiction books about Putin by German journalist Hubert Seipel, following reports that reports by German magazine Der Spiegel and public German television ZDF, saying it was not previously aware of the allegations. The reports on Tuesday claimed that Seipel accepted money indirectly to a sanctioned Russian oligarch to report Putin in a favorable light in the published books. German public television NDR, which had produced a documentary with Seipel in 2012 about Putin and aired his interviews with the Russian president in the past, also said it was considering legal action against the reporter. The allegations, which were also published by other international media outlets, including The Guardian, are based on information that emerged from the Cyprus confidential financial data records that were leaked to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The two books are Putin's Power from 2021 and Putin, Interior Views of a Power from 2015, the publishing house said. Der Spiegel and ZDF reported that when confronted with the claims, Seipel denied ever having received money from the third parties for films or television interviews. At the same time, according to Spiegel, he is said to have acknowledged support with regard to book projects. German television NDR said in a statement that Seipel admitted to NDR that he had received money from Alexei Mordasov via two sponsorship contracts in 2013 and 2018 and explained that it was for two book projects. Mordasov, believed to have close ties to Putin, is one of many oligarchs sanctioned by the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. NDR said the reporter had not disclosed these contracts at the time of their collaboration and that the broadcaster sees this as a significant conflict of interest that casts doubts on Seipel's journalistic independence.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Dee Tang of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Chinese President Xi Jinping signaled that China will send new pandas to the United States, calling them envoys of friendship between the Chinese and American peoples. The gesture came at the end of a day in which Xi and President Joe Biden held their first face-to-face meeting in a year and pledged to try to reduce tensions. Xi did not share additional details on when or where pandas might be provided, but appeared to suggest the next pair of pandas are most likely to come to California, probably San Diego. The bears have long been the symbol of the U.S.-China friendship since Beijing gifted a pair of pandas to the National Zoo in Washington in 1972 ahead of the normalization of bilateral relations. Later, Beijing loaned the pandas to other U.S. zoos, with proceeds going back to panda conservation programs. The National Zoo's three giant pandas, Mijang, Tianqian, and their cub, Zhaoji, 8 days ago began their long trip to China. After their departure, only 4 pandas are left in the United States, all at the Atlanta Zoo. Xi is in California to attend a summit of Indo-Pacific leaders and for his meeting with Biden. He made no mention of the pandas during his public remarks earlier in the day as he met with Biden. The National Zoo's exchange agreement with the China Wildlife Conservation Association had been set to expire in early December, and negotiations to renew or extend the deal did not produce results. The San Diego Zoo returned its pandas in 2019, and the last bear at the Memphis, Tennessee Zoo went home earlier this year. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.